and welcome back to Philosophy for the Lockdown and Beyond. We're in our second lockdown here, as I imagine a lot of you are, so it's time to pick up a new project. I thought this time we might look at Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. This is his main text on moral philosophy and one of the books that you're very likely to study if you're doing an undergraduate degree in philosophy. It is a collection of what was supposed to be notes on his lectures. I don't think he actually wrote anything down. It was the notes of his students collected by his son Nicomachus. That's why it's called Nicomachean Ethics. There are a lot of editions of the text. This is the one I have that I bought a really long time ago. As you can see, it's really well read. You might need to read it more than once. This is an interesting edition as well. It's the Loeb edition. If you have any ancient Greek, this is a really interesting edition because it has the ancient Greek text on one side and the English translation on the other. So if you're ever interested in finding out exactly what words are being used in the original text, it's an interesting translation to have. Just a heads up on how we tend to refer to these Aristotelian texts. If you look at any of the editions on the side or on the top, see here, there are a number of different numbers here that refer to an original edition text. That means when somebody says to you, look at the Nicomachean Ethics 1131b14, they're referring to that original pagination of that edition, which should be included in every other edition and translation of the Nicomachean Ethics, so that everybody can open to the same page, whichever edition they happen to be using. Okay, we'll be doing a chapter by chapter discussion of the Nicomachean Ethics. Some of the chapters are more important than others, so we're going to spend longer on them. I think it would be really good if you read the chapters yourself as well. That way you have an idea of what you think about the text and whether my interpretation is correct or not. If you wanted to read a little bit more, I would recommend something like this. This is the Blackwell's Guide to Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, which has chapters on pretty much all the topics that are covered in the book, in pretty much the order in which they come up in the book. Or a classic collection like this one. This is Rorty's collection, Essays on Aristotle's Ethics, which again covers many of the topics within the Nicomachean Ethics. Okay, so he starts the book with this rather famous sentence: every art and every investigation, and similarly every action and pursuit, is considered to aim at some good. What does he mean by that? It means that everything we do aims at something. If you're a doctor, when you perform medical acts, treatments, cures, research, you aim at something, and this is the health of the patient. The aim is part of the activity. It doesn't make sense to say, I am a doctor and I spend my time in the park playing with my dogs. Because one would wonder, well, what does that have to do with medicine? To be a doctor and to exercise the activity of medicine is to aim at the health of the patients in some sort of way. This is part of what it is to practice medicine. The activity of medicine has this aim. So all sorts of activities have these kinds of aims. If you're interested in military strategy, then that activity, the aim of that activity is a win. You want to beat your opponents in battle. If you're interested in carpentry, then the aim of that activity is to produce something functional or something beautiful out of wood or similar materials related to carpentry. So for each activity there is an aim, but it's even generalized. This is not just a point about specific arts, sciences and investigations. It's a point about what it is to be human. We are human and we are agents. We are people with intentions. We act and we act on reasons, and what we do is an expression of those intentions. Okay, so everything that we do is intentional. It leads to something. This is what he means here. He's interested in this idea that as a type of species, as a type of being, our behavior is intentional. We do things for a reason. And the Nicomachean Ethics is going to ask a very big question: what is the main reason or the final reason for which we act? In a sense, what is the meaning of our lives? How should we live? what kind of people should we be and how should we behave, so that our activities all aim at the right kind of thing. And what is that thing? That is the good. The good is the thing at which all activities, all pursuits, and all investigations aim at. And the Nicomachean Ethics will try to give us some details as to what that is. Basically, it's going to tell us how to live our lives. Now, he draws a distinction here between things that are ends in themselves and things that we do for the sake of other things. Consider, for example, I'm at work and I want to finish promptly so I can be at the bus stop on time. Why do I want to be at the bus stop on time? Because I want to catch the bus. And if I catch the right bus, then I'll be home early. Why do I want to be home early? Because I want to watch the 5th season of Lucifer. Why do I want to watch the 5th season of Lucifer? Because of Tom Ellis. Now, in this series of activities, Tom Ellis is the final end. This is a thing that I do for the sake of the end. I leave work promptly, I go to the bus stop quickly, I catch the right bus, I arrive home at a certain time, I watch the series on TV for Tom Ellis. Everything else is a means to getting to Tom Ellis, and Tom Ellis is the end in himself. In the same way, Aristotle says, many activities aim at something else, and many activities aim at an end which we value for its own sake. The thing that we value as an end to all the activities for itself is the good. This will become clear once he starts explaining what the good is. But the Nicomachean Ethics makes its way through a variety of different ideas. He throws hints at some things and then moves to something else, only to come back and round off the argument later on. So hold on to this idea that the activities aim at something. Some things are a means to something else, like the bus that takes me home so I can see Tom Ellis, and some things are valuable in themselves. They're done for their own sake. I watch Tom Ellis for the sake of Tom Ellis, and all the other things I've done lead me to Tom Ellis. The good is going to be like Tom Ellis, something that I do everything else for the sake of that thing. That's the first start. In some editions of the Nicomachean Ethics, there are parts to the book. So we've just done the very first part. The second part moves on to another idea. The second part, he looks at the activity that studies the good. And for Aristotle, that activity is politics. Now here we start having our first problems with translations. Not every word that Aristotle uses translates very intuitively into other languages. And many times there is a translation but doesn't quite capture the social and cultural background of what Aristotle might have meant by politics. If you think about politics nowadays, you might be a little bit disillusioned or negative. You might think of people who are self-serving, of people who perhaps think only of themselves and who pursue a political career in order to fulfill personal goals or financial goals. This is not what Aristotle would have had in mind. First of all, for him, politics is a community activity. Everybody is involved in it. This is not something that's left to some people. This is not a right you exercise every 4 years and then forget about it. Politics is an activity that everybody is involved in, and its subject matter is how we live together. This is going to link to other ideas. All of this doesn't happen in this second section of the first book, but I'm sort of going to bring other ideas that he speaks about later on in here for you to understand exactly why he thinks politics is so important. He thinks that human beings are social animals. The kind of being that we are as a species is social. Think of different types of animals. We talk about a pride of lions. Yeah? We talk about a colony of ants. These are expressions that tell us something about what kind of species these are. If you take a horse from a herd of horses and keep it on its own, it's likely to get very stressed and you're likely to have problems with your horse. That's why people advise have at least 2 horses together, or ideally 3 horses. This is because horses live in herds and they're the kind of beings that need to live in herds in the same way that lions are the kinds of beings that need to live in a pride, and ants are the kinds of beings that need to live in a colony. And then when you look at how a colony is structured, it's quite different from a pride and it's quite different from a herd. Members have different responsibilities and activities, and the whole works together in a different way in a pride than it does in a colony. Aristotle makes a similar observation about human beings. Looking at the kind of beings that we are shows us that we are a species that lives together, a sociable species, a species for whom the good life involves interaction with other members of the species. Communication, cooperation, life in a society. This is what he means by politics. An activity that brings everybody together, an activity that everybody is involved in, and as such he has a conception of the state which is formed based on these ideas. The state's aim is how we should all live together, and everybody participates in the state in deciding what is the best life for us as social beings. Okay, this is why in the second part of the first book of the Nicomachean Ethics, he comes up with this otherwise surprising statement, that the science that studies the supreme good is politics. For us, this must sound a little bit bizarre to tie these two things together, but this is why he thinks that we're going to figure out what the good life is if we look at how we live together, how we contribute to communal living, to a society, to a state that looks after everybody. Okay, then there is another preliminary point. The first one is that human beings are social animals, and it's politics that looks towards finding out what the good of man is. The second is another extremely important point that has far-reaching implications for how we think about moral philosophy now as well. The idea is this: when you look at morality, there are many different ideas as to what is moral, many different values, many different expressions. Is that a problem? Should we be trying to unify all this and come up with one principle or one rule that gives us the answer for everything? For Aristotle, this is not possible. He says that you cannot expect precision in your answer that you cannot find in your subject matter. So if your subject matter is something really complex, really diverse, how can you capture it with one simple idea? You can never expect that this one idea will capture the complexity of something very diverse. So your answer to moral matters should be as diverse as the subject matter itself. This idea has been extremely influential in the development of virtue ethics in modern times. So don't expect more precision from the answer than the subject matter permits, and morality is going to be a really complex subject matter. The answer to what is the moral thing to do, how should I be a good person, is not going to be simple. In fact, you're going to find out at the end of the book that it's not going to be captured by the book. The book is not going to be a manual for morality that gives you a list of things to do and a list of answers. The book is going to be more a path, suggestions on how to become the kind of person you ought to be. The rest is really up to you. Okay, section 4. Another preliminary idea. Who is our student? And here he suggests another important idea that may sound a bit surprising. He says the young cannot be students of morality and students of virtue because they lack life experience. And by this he doesn't mean just facts and knowledge. He doesn't want the young to be locked up in a lecture theatre in a university and be talked at about morality until they've learned enough about moral theories that they can join us in this discussion. He wants the young to go out and live. He thinks that in order to understand moral matters, you need to have experience of what it means to live as a human being. You need to come across practical situations, and you also need to habituate your feelings. This is going to come up again and again in further books. We're going to discuss it in detail, but it's really important that you come to thinking about what kind of person I should be from the right background, a background in which you have developed the right kinds of habits and you have trained your feelings to push in the right sort of directions. So The young don't have experience of living and they're not able to regulate their emotions. So philosophy and philosophical pursuits that have to do with a good life are the subject matter of older people who have experience and are more regulated in their emotions and their passions. Okay, so those are the preliminaries. And now we come to an answer. Yeah, this is the first time he tries to give us an answer to what is the highest good, the thing that all activities aim at as the end that we value for its own sake. And the highest good is eudaimonia. Okay. I don't know if you can see that. That looks better, doesn't it? Eudaimonia is an ancient Greek word. We're using the original ancient Greek word because there are huge problems with translating this term. Directly, in ancient Greek, it means a positive demon. Therefore, it means some kind of positive supernatural influence in your life so that you live a life of good fortune. As we shall see, the idea of fortune and luck is extremely significant to Aristotle. Will come up again and again in the Nicomachean Ethics and in all his moral philosophy. But for now, this is just the etymological origin of the word, that it means to have a positive demon over your life. How is it translated? It's a very difficult word to translate, and almost any translation leaves something to be desired. It's possible and it's very common to translate it as happiness. The problem with that translation is that happiness in modern English makes us think of other things. For example, when I eat a bar of chocolate, I'm really happy. Is that true? Of course it's true. I'm very happy. I enjoy chocolate. It was a moment of pure pleasure. Why shouldn't I call that happiness? But is that what morality is? Does it have these aspects of happiness, that it is easy to spark, but also easy to go away, easy to disappear? You know, the moment I finish the chocolate, my happiness is gone. Is it fleeting, like the concept of happiness? Is it really fragile, like the concept of happiness? Wake up today, I run out of chocolate, I'm really grumpy, my happiness is gone. Could it be that the good life is that kind of thing that comes and goes so easily, based on these kinds of really frivolous considerations, whether there is chocolate in my cupboard or not? That's why happiness isn't quite the right thing. Happiness also makes us think purely of an emotion, whereas we shall see for Aristotle, eudaimonia has a lot of aspects that link to reason and contemplation, as well as emotions and feelings. Happiness generally doesn't have a lot to do with your reason. It has to do with how you feel in the moment. That's why it's not a very good translation of eudaimonia. It is the most common one though, so if you see it, this is what it is referring to, eudaimonia. Another translation sometimes is well-being, but this one is also deceiving, because well-being makes me think about prudential reasons that have to do with my self-interest. And morality is very often other regarding. It has to do with what we have to do for other people, what their needs are. When I'm being kind, I'm not doing it for myself, I'm doing it for the person who requires the kind response. Otherwise, it would be bizarre to call my act kind if the main benefit came to myself. So well-being kind of doesn't quite fit exactly what Aristotle means here. Neither does prosperity, because prosperity tends to give us an image of someone who is wealthy, doing well in the world, but all these are relative standards by which to judge someone. And Aristotle is looking not at what your society may think makes you a good person, but what really makes you a good person. If you're in a frivolous society that is obsessed with commodities and who thinks that wealth is the measure of a man, that doesn't mean that a wealthy person is in fact a person who has lived a good life. It just means that all these people are mistaken. So prosperity has these connotations that don't work here. By far the best translation, which is becoming a little bit more popular as people are more aware of the depth of the term eudaimonia and what Aristotle may have meant by it, is flourishing. So the ultimate good the end for which every other activity is done, is the flourishing life. This is a life in which you are the best kind of human being that you could be. And this is linked again to the type of thing that you are. So the best kind of horse would be quite different from the best kind of ant, from the best kind of lion, from the best kind of human being. And to flourish as an ant would involve different activities from what it does to flourish as a human being. This is a naturalistic account, and we'll come back to that again. And it's sometimes a reason why Aristotle is criticized, but as we shall see in the next video, when we talk about the function argument, it's also a lot of the criticisms are based on a misunderstanding of Aristotle's appeal to nature. Right? But the flourishing life is a life of a human being. And this is what the ultimate good is. Everything we do aims at flourishing, at eudaimonia. Now here, there is a small digression in the text. The next few paragraphs move on to talking about how the methodology of how we will come to consider questions. And here Aristotle sets himself up against Plato really, and he talks about how we need to start about what is known to us, the endoxa, the way we talk about things, the way we have been taught about things, if our life has been good so far, and if our background has been the right one. We'll come back to the importance of these ideas, will give us a good starting point. So if we want to figure out what flourishing involves, then we should start from what is known to us as people who have had a good upbringing up until now. This is the basis of our discussion. It's not the end of our discussion. It doesn't mean that we don't reject some of the things that are known to us, but it's a good start. This is where we begin. Okay, after that little digression, he starts looking at candidates for the good. What could the flourishing life involve? And this is linked to the ideas I've already told you about how we should understand eudaimonia. Should it be pleasure? Is the flourishing life one in which I have as much pleasure as possible, as many bars of chocolate as possible, as many walks with the dogs as possible, as many indulgences as possible? And when we think about pleasure in this sense, we think of physical pleasure and physical indulgences. And Aristotle says, no, that can't be what the moral life is, because that is the life of cattle. Of course, if you study Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, you know exactly what this line of objection is to the idea that some pleasures are brute. I'm obviously not suggesting that Aristotle had an objection to Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, because that occurred many centuries later. I'm suggesting that this type of objection exists already at the time of Aristotle against the life of pure, brutish, animalistic pleasure, that this cannot be the life of morality. Yeah. The second possibility for the good is the life of honor. Could it be that what we all aim at is honor, the recognition from others that we have done well? Well, Aristotle rejects this one as well, because honor is superficial. First of all, it depends on who confers it on you. It is other people who judge you to be honorable, and they might make the wrong judgment. They might judge you to be honorable for the wrong reasons. So it is not your actions that make you honorable. And it shouldn't be sought for itself. You don't seek honor for itself. Honor is a byproduct of doing what is honorable. Imagine if you aimed at getting honor, you wouldn't deserve it, right? Because you get honor for doing the right thing, not for wanting to be honorable, recognized by others as having done the right thing. If you're aiming at honor, you've missed the point. Right? And when honor is rightly conferred, it's conferred because you've done the right thing for goodness. Therefore, goodness is more fundamental than honor. So honor cannot be the highest good. Now, he also thinks, could it just be a sort of being good without doing anything? This is a peculiar point, and it won't make a lot of sense until we move on later on to look at the definition of virtue. Here he passes through this point really quickly. He basically says, you can be good and you can possess goodness even if you're asleep, or if in your entire life you've never acted because you've been prevented. Imagine somebody who's been, I don't know, prisoner his entire life, never in contact with anybody else, never had the opportunity to act. That person could be good. It is possible that they have all the good intentions, but have they lived a good life when none of these intentions have been expressed into action? Remember, a lot of what Aristotle is interested in is how who we are is expressed in what we do, a life of practical experience and action. So it can't be possible that the good is something that you have that is never exercised because you spent your whole life sleeping, or your whole life a prisoner who cannot act. And then the final suggestion is money. Could money be the good? Well, he says no, because money is always used for the sake of something else. We don't want money for itself. Imagine being the richest person in the world but not doing anything with your money at all, as in not buying food, not buying shelter, not buying education, nothing at all. Then there will be no value to the money itself. The money is a very good example of something that's just a means for the sake of something else. So it cannot be the good. Okay, having rejected then all these possibilities, pleasure, honor, money, and the possibility of the life of complete inaction, he now has a digression which is going to be difficult to read unless you know something about Plato's theory of the forms. Here he is assuming that his reader knows about Plato's theory of the forms, because they would have. Aristotle was Plato's student. Everybody in his audience would have known about Plato. He has a couple of phrases which set the tone for philosophy that is to follow, which is the idea that we might feel a bit bad telling Plato that he was wrong because he's our friend, but really our objective is the pursuit of the truth. And in the spirit of that, it's okay to tell anybody that they were wrong. And this sets the tone for all of philosophy to follow. It's okay to tell your friends they're wrong. This is the purpose of philosophy. Okay. So here in this digression, which you won't understand unless you know Plato's theory of the forms, he set out his main objections for not going for a metaphysical idea of an ideal form which illuminates instances of everything good within particulars in the world. He doesn't believe in the unity of the good. He's already told us that morality is a diverse subject matter. It is so complex and so different that he doesn't think there is one thing that unites all these instances of the good. Nor does he believe in a metaphysical separate existence of the good. Nor does he think that this metaphysical good is something that human beings can reach. Right? So all in all, he rejects a lot of Platonic ideas. From that, which you can skip if you're not familiar with Plato, he jumps back to the idea of diversity of morality. Different activities have different aims. The aim of medicine is health. That is completely different from the aim of political strategy, which is winning a war. That is completely different from the aim of carpentry. So the good is diverse. And what we need is the final good, and this is the reiteration of the argument he had before, is that for the sake of which everything else is done. So all these things aim at their own good, but what do they all aim in the end? Where does it all come together? All the things we pursue honor and pleasure, intelligence and excellence in various fields, in the medical field, in the strategical field, in the carpentry field. What do they all have in common? They are various forms of the flourishing life. Now note here, this is not the same as the Platonic unity. This is not one thing, this is instantiated in different particulars. This is different conceptions of what is the good life. A life that pursues health in the medical field is as flourishing as a life that pursues beauty and functionality in the carpentry field. It's different ways in which you can live your life. And what unites all of them is that you are flourishing. So, finally, one more point that reiterates things that he said before. As you can see in this book, he's making a lot of different points that he's going to pick up later on from different angles. He comes back to them and how they're all interrelated. So he comes back to the idea that no one can live in isolation. We are social beings. So eudaimonia is not a self-sufficient good. It's not an inward-looking good. It's not something that you achieve by yourself, closed off in a dark room. It is self-sufficient only in the sense that this is what makes the life good. It doesn't need anything added to it, but the practice of it involves other people and involves how we all live together. It alone makes life desirable, but the practice of it involves many other things and many other people, like family, friends, everybody else who lives in your state. Okay, that's the first half of the first book, and we're going to pause there. I hope you can go and read the text, and next time we're going to look at the second half, where he admits himself, first of all, that despite everything he has said so far, he hasn't actually told us a lot about what the life of flourishing is. And to do that, he's going to give us the function argument. The function argument will start putting a little bit more meat on the bones of what it is to live a flourishing life. And we'll do that next time. See you then.